Hi, I'm Professor Leggett, and I wanted to give you an introduction to the course and a brief overview of how it works. So, just a little bit about me, as I've been teaching at Kingsborough since 2010. Um, I'm an associate professor in the behavioral sciences program. I look mostly at what's called rights consciousness, or how people think about their rights, in particular in everyday interactions. Um, And so this course that you're taking here is a required course, and then it's also a course that I've developed a lot of materials for and talk about, and is one of my areas of scholarship. The way we think about grading in this class will be in kind of three areas. So you'll have your readings and your annotations of those readings, or the comments you're making on the readings. Those are in Brightspace, and we're using a program called Hypothesis. There will also be discussions that are hopefully conversations that you have with each other based on what you learned from the readings and what you think about them, whether you agree with the questions that were posed, or whether there are things that you'd like to talk about that weren't talked about, or that the author wasn't able to convince you of. And then you'll have your final exam, which will be a comprehensive accounting of all the things that you did in the semester. Um, so if you have questions about any of those, or you are having issues accessing them, you need to email me as quickly as possible, because it's the short 6-week course, and we'll have to start checking to see who does what when within the first few days of the course starting. Um, so at the very least, I'm hoping that you'll have annotated the syllabus and have started the first discussion board and started the first annotated reading for the week, the topic reading. There'll be Google Forms that are offered, for example, like the survey, and then there's an assignment, and then also the final exam. And those are all counted as one unit. The work is based on the idea that you would start doing the work probably on Saturday or Sunday, and you'd be kind of keeping pace that way. That seems to be how most students do it, so that's how I've more or less tried to arrange it. Um, Due dates are flexible, so if you want to get ahead, you're able to get ahead. If you fall behind, you can catch back up. The challenge is engaging in the discussion boards, where you'll need to be commenting with some information. Uh, so you need to think about how to respond to your classmates using things that you're learning in the class. And so it needs to be kind of in that order. So if you fall too far behind, then you lose that connection. So you have to read through all their discussion board posts to figure out where they are and respond to them in that way. Um, or if you get too far ahead, you have to wait for people to comment. So those are things to think about. Uh, Staying as close to the weekly schedule is the most sensible thing to do if you're able. The idea would be that you're going to do the readings first, and then you'd make comments on the discussion board that reflect what you thought about the readings. You should also keep your notes organized so that you're ready for the final exam, because it'll be here before you even blink. That's how quick the 6-week semester goes. And so I've broken it down into themes. And so we start off what you're getting here, the introduction and course overview, just kind of checking in to make sure everybody's ready. Then we jump into how to think about and see inequality in legal institutions. And you'll read and annotate and then complete a discussion board. Then we moved on to the most 5 of the Supreme Court justices use an interpretation strategy called originalism. So I introduce you to that so you know how they think about law. And then I ask you to make comments on that. We then look at a problem with that approach, or we reveal why it's incomplete or very problematic. way to approach interpretation by looking at a pretty basic concept that forms the foundations for constitutional law, which is the concept of sovereignty. And at the same time, it allows me to help you learn how to do legal writing by looking at how legal writing is done in a Supreme Court case, and then to practice a little bit yourself. And then also to think a little bit more in the modern way of thinking about sovereignty and being able to compare and contrast that to how people thought about sovereignty in the 1600s, the 1700s, and the 1800s, and how that changed over time. Then, because at that point we'll be already past the halfway point, you've got to jump right into reading more Supreme Court cases. And so I'm only asking you to read and annotate that week, just in case you get behind, you don't get further behind with a discussion board. So those next 2 weeks, I'm really focusing on having you do reading and think deeply so that you're ready for the final exam, because you're going to have to apply concepts from those 2 readings on the final exam. And so one is the formal law written from the point of view of the judges, and you will be able to identify which interpretation method they're using to legal write. And then you'll think about what does that mean in everyday injustice, kind of how we started the 6-week process. We're reflecting back on, so what did we learn about that? Then just on a technical note, you'd be completing the final exam and completing any late work by no later than February 23rd. And so that's like just something to keep for your organization of your time and how to manage it between now and February 23rd. We log into Brightspace. If you have issues with Brightspace, you need to contact the Kingsborough Help Desk and have them help you get access to Brightspace and figure out what difficulties you're having. If you are able to get into Brightspace and you want to just kind of explore a little bit, the way I think about using Brightspace is kind of like a book, and so you go to the table of contents, and that gives you a guide as to how I think or how I want you to proceed. And so you'll see that these themes are common in the discussion boards, in the readings, and in the overall thematic structure of the course outline, which you'll see in the syllabus. And so that's the flow or the organization of the course itself. When you think about the discussion boards, then I'm hoping that you'll pull from those different areas and start to make comments that are reflective of what you're learning, and then also what you're learning from other learners in that space, and what that tells us about law and inequality in particular. Here's an example of the reading annotations. So I've given you some guidelines to use. So you put a code before you do the reading, comment. And so, for example, if you have a question, you put a Q, and then you have a question about whatever you highlighted in the text. And so here's an example of what it looks like. And then each of the readings you go through. This is really helpful for me to see how you're understanding the concepts and what you're able to apply to the other assignments. And so it gives me a more complete picture of your learning process and helps me understand how to better help you. So feel free to ask me any questions you have about the process, along with the questions you have about the reading, or if you want to suggest other readings or videos or anything else that's useful for us. You'd use the code R for research, and then you'd provide the hyperlink in the space. So the idea is we're collecting comments to help us all better understand the concepts that the readings are trying to get us to use. That's all you really have. It's a pretty straightforward class. So I hope that if you have any questions, you'll email me, or you'll just get started and let me know how I can help you. Best of luck and Happy New Year.